This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Score Sheet podcast. Holy Kadelka!
Hello again, and welcome to another Score Sheet podcast. Last week, I went down, as I try to do almost every year, to Arizona for a few days of Ron Shandler's Arizona Fall League Fantasy Symposium. Ron Shandler started the Baseball HQ website and baseball forecaster, general fantasy information back in the late 1980s. In 1994, he put on the first of his Arizona Fall League Symposiums. I think in the 18 years he's done this, I missed 4 or 5 in the late 90s, but in the last dozen years I've made 10 of those. It's a really good time. This year we had 130 folks that are either fantasy players or a few of us that are kind of in the fantasy industry itself all showed up. A variety of reasons that so many of us go down to Arizona for 3 or 4 days. Probably the best thing to do down there is just plain going to the AFL games themselves. They're very sparsely attended, but the quality of play is quite good. Bryce Harper was down there this year and getting to sit 2 rows behind home plate, directly behind the plate while Bryce bats. I don't think you'll be able to do that very much longer. So that was pretty good. Sitting right there behind home plate while some of these pitchers that are about to make the major leagues throw 95, 98, even 100 miles an hour. It is pretty exciting. Some of those pitchers were quite impressive, others not so much so. We saw Garrett Cole at the AFL All-Star game. I think he lasted 2/3 of an inning, gave up 5 runs and 2 homers. He was throwing the ball about 95 miles an hour, but it wasn't moving much. It was pretty much down the heart of the plate. And the hitters in the AFL are good enough. I don't care how hard you throw it. If the ball doesn't move and it's down the middle, it leaves the yard faster than it came to the plate. So while nobody should give up on a pitcher just because of one outing in the Arizona Fall League, I can't believe Pittsburgh was very happy to see their top draft pick get shelled in an AFL game, especially considering that over the last 20 years, pretty much every pitcher that Pittsburgh has drafted in the first round has flamed out. So hopefully that won't happen to Cole. Along with watching AFL games, there's a variety of panels, discussions, fantasy experts, mainly this time of year minor league experts, talking about what to expect from players in 2012. Some of the players performed well or badly in 2011 and why. Ron Shandler, of course, talked quite a bit, and many of the writers from Baseball HQ, Rob Gordon, who's their minor league expert, Doug Dennis, who's their pitching expert, and who also apparently has a mom that he claims hits better than Adam Dunn does. Those guys were talking. Joe Sheehan, variety of writers from ESPN were there, Eric Karabell mainly, Jason Gray was talking. It was quite a mix of folks. Greg Ambrosius, who's been running fantasy games and editor of fantasy magazines for 25 years now, was there. Some of the players I got to see that really stood out, either because they performed well while I saw them, or more likely because some of the experts, which I am not, said good things about them, included Nick Franklin, the young shortstop for Seattle. It was pretty good consensus that in a couple years he will really be a valuable player for the Mariners. Another player that looked good was Nolan Arenado, the third baseman for Colorado. I think there's a pretty good chance he'll be their starting third baseman in 2012, so you might want to keep an eye on him if he's still available in your league. One guy that's close to my heart is a Giant, Brandon Crawford. My friend Jason Gray on Saturday morning was saying he thought Brandon Crawford could hit 15 to 20 home runs in the majors. I started laughing. I was wondering whether he meant as a career or whether he really meant in a year. So, that afternoon, we went to an AFL game where Brandon Crawford happened to be playing. As I'm walking over to the section Jason's sitting in to ask him what made him say such a, to me, ludicrous thought that Brandon Crawford could hit 15 to 20 homers, Brandon Crawford comes to bat. I pause, I watch. He cranks a home run to dead center, 420 feet. Made me think I'm glad that I hadn't made it all the way to Jason yet, since apparently Jason knows more than I do, which I knew already. But as a Giants fan, that made me quite happy. The Giants have a desperate need for a shortstop. You know, if the Giants sign a shortstop, obviously Brandon's going to be blocked. But if they don't sign anybody between now and your draft, he's going to pretty much be handed the starting job, and if he can hit a few homers, you might be happy to get him. Of course, there are also some players I saw down there that either the experts didn't like very much, even though they were drafted pretty high, or that just plain seemed disappointing. One of the guys that was disappointing was Aaron Hicks. I think he's been in the majors now, or not the majors, the minors, for 4 years. I think he was the Twins' first-round pick back in 2008. I think picked 14th overall, and hasn't ever made it past high A ball, and didn't look very good in the game or two we saw him at, and the general consensus among the folks talking in all these panels was that he just hasn't really put it together yet. He's got great tools, but doesn't seem to have figured out the game of baseball. And then, of course, there's the guys that you get mixed reviews on. Danny Holtzen, the number 2 pick in this June's draft by Seattle, he looked really good in that same All-Star game that Garrett Cole got shelled in. Holtzen was just mowing folks down left and right. It was kind of interesting. All the fantasy guys that were talking on these panels were saying he looked great. The one real-life Major League scout that was there and talked for 2 hours kind of had the opposite opinion. He thought there were guys like Bradley that had been taken 15 picks later or even a round or two later that he would rather have. So it's certainly not a science. I mean, if you listen to enough guys, you can get different opinions on anybody. And speaking of opinions, Rob Gordon, who I mentioned earlier is the minor league expert for Baseball HQ, I'm going to get him on hopefully our next podcast and ask him some questions of who he thinks might be kind of a sleeper in the minor leagues, who he thinks will be up in 2012 that could help out. If you have a specific minor leaguer you'd like me to ask him about, send me an email and let me know who it is, and I'll be sure to ask him about that player. Let's see. Experts that were down there. Some of those guys have books that are either going to be coming out in the next few months or even out now. I picked up my copy of Bill James' handbook while I was down in Arizona. That's, of course, the book that shows the stats of every player that was in the majors last year. And they've added a lot of things to that book over the years. They've got Fielding Bible Awards this year. They've got situational batting. They've got team statistics. And, of course, they have projections for hitters and pitchers for 2012 that Bill James has come up with. So that book's out now. Ron Shandler's Baseball Forecaster will be coming out very soon. And, of course, all the other annuals that most of us read start coming out and will be coming out over the next couple months. If you'd like to take a look at the list of books that scoresheet people find particularly interesting, go to our website and check out our bookstore. Pretty much all the books that I use and that many scoresheet players have told us they use are listed there. Hope you've had as good a week as I did last week, and we'll talk to you next time.